Welcome everyone. It is 3 p.m. and it's time for the Server Room Show. This is episode 29. Thank you for STF Public Unix System for hosting the server. Today I would like to talk about something which probably all of you know who work in IT, and probably you also came across this dilemma. To be honest, it's a constant dilemma, at least for me and for the people who are more like a visual type. It's diagrams and most importantly, it's Visio, Microsoft Visio's dominance on the workplaces in general. So far, wherever I've worked, it was always all diagrams or visual material, including diagrams or flow charts or the thousand other type of these visual representations exist. They were always made and expected to be made in Microsoft Visio. And the interesting thing is that there are a lot of alternatives out there, maybe sometimes not as fancy, but to be honest with you, I think that the part of the fanciness, as far as we look at the visual aspect, the fanciness comes from what in Visio is known as the stencils, those SVG kind images, raster images you can use in your drawing and resize them and move them around. For example, the ones which represent a server or a router or a switch. So Visio is very well known about the big these stencil libraries. It can have many manufacturers. They provide many times strictly just in Visio their stencils, their symbols or images to be able to use on a drawing. For example, a network layout representation, for example Cisco or Juniper. And by doing that, as they are being big names in the industry, somehow they push the companies and with that us IT people to use Microsoft Visio when we drawing those diagrams of the network, which imagine if it's full with Juniper and Cisco products. If we stick with that analogy, then to use the nicest or the most proper or the most beautiful way intended by the manufacturer, by providing a proper I'm still calling it stencil because I don't really have a better name for it, or it's like shapes or little images, no better name for it. They provide it in this stencil format of Visio, not in any kind of other format which other drawing tools could use, either open source ones or free drawing tools. I will mention a few and you can pick and mix and match your own. As they only provide it in Visio, they force us to use Visio, unless somehow you are lucky enough that your company doesn't forces you to use Visio and they say I don't care how on your diagram or how on the network layout diagram our Cisco switches look or be represented, as long as it's accurate, the information is accurate. For me, as much as I care, it could be represented with a triangle or a circle or a rectangular shape, as far as we agree on a common language, so to say, let's say triangle we use for switches and rectangles for routers, and therefore we make the diagram to be in a so to say universal language for all of us. But unfortunately, companies are known to love more the flashy things and shiny things than actually caring about that the information is to be correct, the one represented on those diagrams, and that could be perfectly achieved with open source alternatives or a cheaper drawing tools, and it should not be Visio mandatorily in that case, because Visio is expensive. And so the dilemma is that I always try to look for a Visio alternative which can use these shiny and nice stencils. To be honest, if someone knows a way, or if there is a way to convert those Visio stencils, because in the end they, as I said previously, similar to SVG raster images, maybe if someone would know a way to convert these Visio stencil packs to anything so to say open source, to be used in a free drawing application, like, let me mention them. For example, draw.io is a very basic one. You can use it on your browser, and it's free. Or Diagramo, or Dia. Even LibreOffice has the draw application. No problem with that. There is one called YED, which spells nearly like yes, but with a D in the end. And it even has a commercial offering named as Graffiti, which comes in as a plugin in the Atlassian platform, which maybe some of you know or some of you use. I looked at it, how much could it be as a kind of like an intranet or an all-in-one tool replacement, because they have very cheap licensing. So for teams of size of 10 or under, let's say for example yourself only, you can get a license for $10 for the first year, and you don't need to renew. So you would continue using it, accepting this team size limitation. So as long as it's for yourself, or maybe 2-3 people, including yourself, a small team, you can get in very cheap. And if you look at Atlassian, it is not just, as I mentioned, Graffiti, which is Yed's commercial offering in the name of Graffiti diagram plugin. It's a whole, best to call it, I think it's a whole ecosystem. So you can have things about ticketing system, things about supporting kind of like a software development and build process. It's a full ecosystem. I don't have a better name for Atlassian, and it comes with an Atlassian marketplace, where you can find, like I said, modules written for Atlassian for the diagramming part, or this kind of theme kind of things. And why I started to look at it, because even in this community edition, or the cheapest $10 license one, you can do self-hosting, and you know that whichever I can self-host, I'm always interested in. So that was just one of the diagram editor I was looking at. So the issue is always with Microsoft Visio and its extensive stencil library. So the day when someone comes up with a way to convert these stencils to any other format which can be used in all these other offerings for diagram applications, I think it will be a great day to be honest. And I know that some of the online drawing companies or offerings like Lucidchart, I know that they mentioned that they are kind of compatible with Visio, this and that. The reason I never really looked into it, that as far as I remember, they don't have a free tier in the pricing. So I think after 30 days, it's immediately you need to buy into a plan, and even the cheapest one per month, it was not something I wanted to do. And to be honest, mostly except draw.io, which you can use online for free in your browser, the rest of the drawing applications, personally, I don't like this browser based and cloud based, so to say. And that's one of the reasons why Microsoft Visio online itself, it's not an alternative for me, because as always, you can have a look the online applications or the online versions of Microsoft tools. They are never as powerful as the desktop versions, and again, we are talking about a monthly commitment, and I pretty much prefer, I will mention one of the options I found as an alternative, which is Visual Paradigm. Not just that they have a community option, but apart from their monthly plans, you can also from the free community version, you can step up to a version which knows obviously more. I will link the feature comparison site link for them for a $99 one-time price, if I remember correctly. Let me see. Yes, the modeler version is $99, and it's a one-time perpetual license. So these monthly subscriptions like Lucidcharts or Microsoft Visio Online itself, these online things, I'm never really a firm believer. I prefer something on the desktop, running on the desktop on itself. And after trying Draw.io, which was the only one which is quite simple, I came to Visual Paradigm, as it has the community version, and it has a native Linux application. And while the dilemma still exists, I cannot or I didn't figure out how could I use some of those visual stencils in Visual Paradigm, even though Visual Paradigm mentions that it's able to import in Visual Microsoft Visio drawings. I tried with a couple from my work, and it didn't do it, or maybe it doesn't do it in the community version, but I was not really successful. I did see, I think, kind of like I would call it like a stencil editor in itself, Visual Paradigm, which lets you draw your own images or diagrams or stencils. I don't know what's the best name for it, and maybe with an ugly way of importing the stencil images one by one there, maybe like that I could make it work, silly as it sounds. Maybe I will try it out and let you know how it works, because in the end of the day, the more in-depth functions in Visio we have to use at the workplace, when they force us to create those drawings, they never really ask us to use the really integrated features which connects you to Excel and taking data and representing it on the drawing like kind of like a live data, or I don't know the better word for it, interactive ways. They really just make you use Visio as a very simple diagram application, not taking advantage of the in-depth form of presenting data the way Visio really can do, and in that it is really great. But they just make you use it as a simple diagram application, and only because of the fancy looks, so to say, the fancy icons or whatnot, to call them stencils, you can use. Whereas only to do that, they could just use either visual paradigm or draw.io would be more than enough to do network diagrams. I think in most of the companies, I have the basic example of draw.io brought up on my screen, and I mean, half of the companies out there doesn't even have 1/10 of the complexity of their network infrastructure, because either it's cloud-based also, their drawing ends when it goes to the cloud to Amazon or Microsoft, or they just don't have this much complexity. So I really, that's why I don't understand the craziness for Visio. And I mentioned that Visio does have the online way to use it. It's a subscription based. It even has two types, and one is around $5 per month and another one is 15, but no native desktop application for Linux. And I think I mentioned it in the talk when most probably about when we talked about open source. I think I mentioned there that all this thing Microsoft is doing, that Microsoft loves Linux and Microsoft loves open source, and they're coming out with news that they are open sourcing this and they're making available for Windows subsystem for Linux DirectX and all these kind of things. As I mentioned before, I will believe, and I'm gonna be a believer of Microsoft's commitments to open source and to Linux the moment they bring out Microsoft Office, including Microsoft Visio as a native Linux application. And I would be willing to pay for the application. Not the subscription model they are forcing lately. Every company is in the last couple of years, this subscription model of pay continuously. I don't have a better name for it. Pay continuously for something you don't own. It reminds me when with the games, the DLC, the downloadable content started. I mean, back in the day, it was you made a product or a game or whatever it was, and it was in a shiny box. You went, you bought it, the price was X amount of dollars or whatever your local currency was. You took it home and it was yours. You could put it in your bed, you could sleep with it, you could have it next to your nightstand. You could have a shelf with all the boxes of the legal software you bought. And fast forward to 2021. No, 2020. Wait, we are not in 2021 yet. Fast forward to 2020, and all you can show for yourself is subscription services and the bills for subscription services. And while I understand that in certain kind of products like Netflix, a big video catalog, or Amazon Prime, or something along those lines, a subscription-based model works, why it has to be forced down on the user's throat in everywhere else? So since when it is that you pay for something, and not just paying for something once, because that would be the best, paying for something one time and then it's yours and you own it, but actually I don't know, probably it started before, because somehow I remember iTunes and this Apple Music thing, that when did it started to be okay that you pay for something which you don't own, or you pay for something excessively, meaning that you don't need that much. It's like with mobile phone subscriptions that they tell you your monthly bill is gonna be X amount of dollars, but don't worry because you're gonna have 200 gigabytes of mobile data traffic, and you say no, all I need is, let's say, 2 gigabytes of traffic. No, that's not possible. So you either pay, let's say, I'm just gonna throw a number out there, you either pay $60 a month for your mobile phone subscription and you get 200 gigabytes of data, or you pay zero but then you're gonna have zero, and there is no tier or level, so to say, in between. There is no package with 2 gigabytes of data for let's say $10, just to give you an example. And it is pretty much from the similar from these subscription models that pay us $5 or $10 or $20 dollars a month, and you're gonna have all this incredible amount of things which probably half of it you're not gonna ever use, or in the case of music you're not even gonna listen. But the day when you stop paying for it, you have nothing to show for. So it's like, for me it's still paying for something you don't own, and I definitely don't want to do that when it comes to diagramming software or software in general. So I like to have a desktop application on the computer, and I buy the license and I own it. And then they can argue that when the next version comes out, you are entitled or not entitled to upgrade. We went a bit far from drawing applications in general, but somehow like that you see the underlying issues around this whole topic. So it's not just the diagramming itself, it's that with everything you are getting more and more forced into a subscription-based model, which is like paying for something you don't own. And okay, let's be honest, it's fine with Netflix, it's fine with Amazon Prime. Let's even say that it's fine with Apple Music, so you can have access to music probably you don't need and you don't want and you don't care about, and the radio service, the Beats. Okay, let's say in music and video it works, video catalogs and music catalogs, but in general software, like let's say a drawing application or insert whatever application you look for, and after you Google it, and they do exist, but they have some kind of some kind of a cloud version application, so it's not a native application in none of the platforms, so not on Windows, not on Linux, not on Mac. It's just something somewhere in a cloud. So no, I'm sorry, but that doesn't work for me. I cannot have all my applications up in a cloud somewhere, and when the next time when you are stuck in a tunnel, on a train, or some remote location, there is no way to use or to work on something which you in theory pay for. I willingly don't say own, because you don't own when you are on a subscription service. So I think there is a need for desktop applications, not this subscription based of things. If someone likes it and has an internet connection wherever he or she goes, or anywhere, and not going to remote areas, or have no problem with the internet connection, it's okay. But I like to have that piece of software on the computer, so I can use it in a dark room, completely isolated from internet, maybe not even being plugged into electricity, and it still works. It reminds me when they asked, I think it was George R.R. Martin, what he writes his books on, his novels on, and he mentioned some version of I think it was Word. No, not Word. It was one of these DOS-based text editor, like from the late 80s or something like that. I remember the name of the application, but now not even for money I would remember. And he mentioned also that on that computer there is no internet access. It only has that piece of program. It works. It never failed him. It's not like Word that it closes down and after unable to restore your what you were working on. So no, thank you very much. I mean, I want it on my computer, which is there on it, and I don't need a browser for that. I don't need internet connection for that. So this dominance in Visio on the workplace, Microsoft has to bring out a Linux version of Microsoft Office and Visio, and then I'm willing to believe that they are committed to Linux community and open source in general, and I would happily pay for the price to have Microsoft Visio or Office in this case, not needing to run a virtual machine each time I need Microsoft Word or whatever for some strange reason. And no subscription model, so I want to pay once and I want to own the version or the software. But let's see how it works out. So until then, you can also look at the show notes. I mentioned some of the drawing or diagramming tools or flowchart making tools. I don't know which names you prefer to use. I came across. None of them is replacing Visio. I mean, I'm unable to use those stencils of Visio in these drawing tools I mentioned in the show notes, mostly because the feature is not existing in them, or I couldn't figure out a way how to import those stencils into them, even though Visual Paradigm came the closest so far, even promising Visio import possibility. Maybe not in the community edition. I was not able to open a Visio file. I tried with a few from work, but I was not successful, so I had to keep using Visio for those diagramming needs for work. I couldn't find a suitable alternative, and as I mentioned, companies are, because of the fancy looking aspect of Visio, not because of the underlying features it gives you for Excel and the live data connections, they just don't wanna let it go, and they don't wanna have you use anything else. However, you could perfectly present the same drawing or the same message or the same correct diagram using anything else, but it seems the day has not yet come for that. So thank you very much for listening, and see you all next Saturday.